Hey everybody, how are you? Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome back to art. Let's get started with this week's lesson. So far this year we've talked a lot about that list called the elements of art. Line, shape, color, things like that. Now the reason that we start off the year talking about those things is because those are like the ingredients, we've said, like the building blocks that you're going to use for any kind of art that you really ever make. All those things are super important. We've been talking about them like one at a time. Now we're going to kind of start to combine them. Instead of just focusing on one, we're gonna use them more. So what we'll be doing today has a lot to do with shapes. But instead of just talking about shape, we're actually going to start combining some stuff together to make something. And what we're going to make for this first project like that is a castle. So these castle drawings are going to use everything we've talked about so far. They're going to use lines and shapes and color. So let's talk about castles for a minute. If we look at this castle here and we think about like the main shapes that it's made up of, what are some of the shapes that you see? Yeah, me too. If you said rectangles, I agree. Rectangles, squares, there's a lot of them up here. If we look at like the two main shapes of our castle here, those are two really big rectangles, right? Then if we think about the towers of our castle, those are really tall but skinny rectangles. Add one more rectangle in the middle for good measure, and you've got a castle. And all you needed to do was draw a bunch of rectangles, combine them together. Now, there's a lot of details on this castle that aren't just rectangles. There's the windows, but those are things like squares and maybe a square with a curved line on top instead of a straight line. So those are all things that you know how to make already. Now this castle was kind of a simple one. Well, let's look at a more complicated, a more complex castle real fast. That would be a tough one. That would be a tough one to draw. But if we think about the shapes that it's made of, there we go. The shapes that it's made of, it's things that we know. It's things like rectangles, and the pointy parts on top are just triangles, and you guys can all do that. So it doesn't matter if you want your castle to be really simple or really complicated, the way that you're gonna do it is the same. You're gonna do it by taking shapes that we know, combining them together to make that castle. There's two words I want to talk about real quick before we get started. Simple and complex. Simple shapes are what we've been talking about all year. They're things that we know every time we look at. A square, a triangle, a rectangle, things like that. Now when we combine simple shapes, when we add a bunch of simple shapes together, that's when we start getting complex shapes. And a complex shape is just, like we said, a big crazy shape made up of a bunch of smaller simple shapes. So those castle examples were two good examples of something simple and something complex. The first one, just made up of a couple rectangles, right? The second one, a whole lot more going on. So your castles, it's up to you. It can be as simple as you want or as complicated as you want. All right, that's kind of all the talking I wanted to do. Let's get started drawing and we'll make some castles. All right, everybody. So today you're gonna need some paper, you're gonna need a pencil, and you're gonna need some crayons or something else to color with. All right, I'm gonna use a marker, but that's just so you can see better. Like always, please draw yours with a pencil. That way if there's anything you want to change about it, you can, because once I use this, it's done. All right, so let's talk about our castle for a minute. First, I want to show where my castle is. I don't just want to see a castle kind of floating here. I want to think about the area around it. Now, a lot of castles were built on hills. You can put your castle wherever you want it, but I'm going to go ahead and draw a little hill for my castle to sit on. But again, just because my castle's on a hill does not mean that yours needs to be. That's just the choice that I wanted to make. So now let's think about the castle pictures that we saw. We said that they were made out of some simple shapes that we combined. So I'm going to start with like the center part of my castle, and I'm going to use a rectangle for that. Now before I worry about any details or anything, I'm just going to get some of my main shapes on here. For those towers on the side, I'm going to use more rectangles, except these will be tall and skinny. And now I think I want one more tower in the middle, and I'm going to put a triangle on top of this one so it looks a little bit more like that complicated, that complex castle that we saw. Alright, so right now it might kind of look like a castle, but it also still looks like a lot of shapes piled on top of each other. Now the thing that we're going to do to fix that is I'm going to add some details. Now when we talk about details in our artwork, those are the little things, the important things that tell you all the way what's going on. So I'm going to add things like maybe the big door on the front, maybe some windows, going to draw those blocks up at the top of my towers. That'll really help give it that castle look. And let's see, let's do another big window here. And I am going to put me a nice big flag up there on the top. So now I can go through and I can add some more details if I want to. These big giant doors were made of wood, so I'm going to go ahead and make it look like the individual boards are there. Let's see, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple lines, not a bunch of them. And these will kind of be where my blocks are, where those big stone blocks are that they use to build a castle. Like I said, I'm not going to go in and draw each individual block, although you could if you wanted to. I'm just going to draw some lines so it sort of gives us the idea that this castle is made out of those blocks. Maybe a couple trees or something near it. There we go. I believe I'm happy with that. I think this is a good looking castle. All right, my friends. So when you're deciding what you want your castle to look like, you can add as many different shapes as you want. Now, if it was me, I would think about most castles are going to have the main part and some towers. So those are pretty important parts to show in your castle. All the other stuff, though, can be completely up to you. You can add more. If I wanted more flags, more towers, if I wanted it to be bigger, I could have. That's fine. But I would say we would all want kind of those three main parts at least. After you have that, you can add as much more stuff as you want. Now that this is done being drawn, I am going to go ahead and color it just so you guys can see what it looks like when it's finished. But I don't want to waste a bunch of your time, so I'll speed it up real quick so you can see the final project. All right, well, there's my castle. It's all finished. Now I used gray because that would be the color of, like a stone block. But you don't have to. It does not have to be realistic. If you want a pink castle, that's fine. I think a pink castle would look awesome. So it's completely up to you. Remember, yours does not have to look like mine. It can if you want to. If you like this and you think, man, I like that castle, then that's fine too. But it can look completely different. be as creative as you want, because that's why we're doing this. It's why we're doing art stuff in the first place. Is being creative is a really, really great thing to practice, because just like anything else, if we don't practice it, then it doesn't work as well for us. All right, my friends, can't wait to see some of your castles whenever you're finished. Click that link to send me that little Flipgrid video, and hope everybody's doing well. See you guys later. Bye.